Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, hear an action-packed summary of meetings we attended this week on what we learned, what's going on now, and what's coming down the pike in the ag industry. Joe, Ben, and Lynn attended Iowa State's Crop Advantage Series in Burlington, Iowa, and Avery and Dylan attended FarmCon in Kansas City, Missouri.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben, Avery, Dylan, and Lynn. And the reason why we have some extra folks here today is we had two big meetings this week, and we want to give you our take on them and bring you up to date. Avery, we're going to let you start and talk about the meeting you attended.
Perfect, yeah. Dylan and I went down to Kansas City Tuesday and spent down Wednesday and Thursday at a meeting called FarmCon. And FarmCon is, I say, mainly a big networking event, but it's bringing creative minds of agriculture together. So you have either big startup ag company, there's a lot of ag startup companies there. That's where like Meristem got started. You have big farmers, progressive farmers, like from the Extreme Ag Group. You have seed companies like ourselves, seed salesmen, and it's just getting a lot of people together down there and networking and bouncing ideas off of each other and seeing, how we paving the way for the ag industry. And it was pretty amazing. It was my first experience, so of course I was trying to soak up as much as I could and meet people, and that's the big thing is like they force you to network, and so we had a really good time. We had no agenda of dinner plans or anything like that, and meeting people, and we had some really good experiences down there. My takeaway from it is, there's a lot to talk about. Kind of the big thing there is, when it comes to like the marketing side of things or the industry, I forgot my notebook, but I have screenshots of people. There's an ag analyst, Chris Parkinson from Wolf Research. He's an investment company that focuses on ag businesses, and he talked about how has the industry changed within the last 10-20 years, and he talked about how the transition from 06 to 16 Monsanto was the juggernaut of the industry on genetics and all that, and then leading into Bayer with the dicamba. And if you're looking in the future right now, if you were an investor or anybody that's wanting to invest in an ag company on the seed side of things, where do you put your money? And it's behind the Enlist trait. The Enlist trait is definitely, we've all talked about it, it is the market shareholder right now. But then with the new introduction of PowerCore Enlist, he mentioned that. He said the portfolio that it's going to grab, or the market share that it's going to grab on both corn and beans, is going to be massive in the next couple of years. And they just feel like the genetic pool behind that, those traits are very strong. They're going to compete against the Bayers and Syngenta's out there in the world. So that was really cool to hear. Another thing of the investment is, like, I'll be truly honest, it's kind of depressing, like being a young kid trying to invest in land or anything like that. How do you get started? Heck, they beat you down with a stick saying you got to have a lot of capital, got to have a lot of money. And so they talked about how in the last 10 years, farmland prices has raised 40%. And so they said, where's that money coming from? And so they had a chart that said investors from the S&P 500 are now the investors of land. And so they're like, how did that come about? We hear Bill Gates and all them investing in land, of course. And doesn't matter, they're paying record pricing for rice farms down in the bottom of in the United States, or up in North Dakota and South Dakota, just buying big pieces of land. And so they're talking about that. And being able to network with those people and connect and getting access to land is a big mover right now in the ag industry. So that was kind of cool to listen to. They talk about certain companies in the ag sector to invest in if you're on the stock market trading and all that. So, that's a total different world than I'm aware of, but it was cool to hear that. We had a weather guy, what was his name? Gary.
Yep.
Yeah. He worked for KC.
The Chiefs. He works for the Chiefs right now.
Yeah, but all I know is he's got an algorithm and stuff like that he can project. He's got this weather model that he projects all major events from snow to rain to hurricanes. And so his deal calculated all the 5 hurricanes last year. He projected the big snowstorm that Kansas City got 42 days in advance. And so that's what it's using the models, looking how.
And he didn't put the Chiefs on a plane sooner?
No, but that was the thing he talked about. So the Chiefs actually called him up, and he had him stay in Denver because he knew the scenarios and the scenario in Kansas City. So I guess he got that right just because he knew what the heck was on the ground. But
yeah, he's just like, we cannot have one individual get in the ice, in a wreck of a car, get killed, be whatever. He's like, so just stay in Colorado for one extra day, fly back the next day. So that was really cool. And he's talking about the spring and summer that we're going to have. And I'll mention a few of those things here I screenshotted. The probability of a wet stretch. All right, this was a calculation that he's looking into this summer. It's going to be above average here, in Kansas, Missouri, and western Iowa, pretty much just west of the Mississippi. I mean, here in southeast Iowa, we're going to have some, but he was talking about there's a 60% chance of a high above average wet stretch from March 1st to March 28th, and then there's an 80% chance from April 11th to May 5th. We all know we get a lot of springtime storms, and so of course we're going to see that. But he's saying that there's going to be a tighter window this year on getting your crops planted, and so be ready to roll in late March, early April.
And he talked about too. It seems like every year it's getting shorter and shorter. It feels like. But then he also mentioned the bad word of snow in March. So hopefully he's wrong in that aspect because we don't want to deal with that going into that time of. Hopefully, getting everything in the ground.
Statistically speaking, 50% of our snowfall can come in March. That's because it's a lot warmer, and when we do get a snowfall in March, you can get that great big one. Of course, it might be the first part of March, not the end of March, obviously.
Yeah, the snowstorms. You said that's huge. And then so they have a whole bunch of ag speakers, but also they want to bring in unique, keynote speakers, and so they brought in what we call Duncan Waldred. He's the head of innovation and creativity for Disney. Talking about his job of, how do they keep a creative mind within Disney, within their team. And so how do you keep your team creative here at, let's say Nourishment Seeds or whoever, and going through tips and tricks and, how do you keep open-minded? How do you, advance and stuff like that? So it was really cool to listen to his perspective. How did they go from, how was Netflix developed? How was Disney Plus developed? How was that little Disney wristband deal? How that was developed? How does he get this Super Bowl winning quarterback on a plane? He said year 1, it's real easy. They all want to go to Disney. Year 2 and 3, they really don't want to go to Disney. So talking about the challenges of that or building amusement parks, that was really cool. And that's why I think, looking outside of your business, not being narrow-minded, how does someone else do it? How can you kind of bring their approach into your business to be a little bit more, set yourself apart? So we had him talk, Duncan, and that was really cool. The crowd was lively during that bunch. And then we had Jim Craig, and he was on the 1980 Winter Olympics team. He's, the Miracles on Ice. And
beat the Russians, right?
Talking about his journey, even though he was one of the top goalies, unfortunately he had an early career-ending injury that he had to, his dream was the NHL, right? And unfortunately he had to change his life. And, how do you keep yourself competitive? And so those were really, really, really cool, getting you motivated. And they kind of do that at the end of the day. So I think it really got people motivated to start networking at night. And so we met a lot of great people on my aspect of things. And so just learning from other people and how do you continue to do better. So
the other thing too is now last year they did post all these videos on YouTube, and I don't know if they're going to do it this year, but if they do, we'll let everybody know so you can watch these same speakers that we just talked about.
Yep. I'll add something quick. There was a panel on inputs that are coming up in chemistries and fertilizer, and the experts think that we've kind of hit the bottom of where we're going to see the prices, just because the future is kind of untold right now, at least at the meeting in Kansas City. They just think if tariffs do get put in place, those just can be passed on to the producer, which we kind of already would imagine that. But then a big thing, like if potash is coming out of Canada, a big thing that is in contracts already that is just going to get pushed right to the retailer. Well, what happens then? It just keeps moving down the chain, even though there could be no supply issues, especially in like chemistry. But we know there's a lot of that chemistry comes out of China, and even if there's no supply issues, like they say, there's great supply. You shouldn't be worried about that. It's just getting it over here with the games that might be played. But everyone is really kind of glad, I guess, or relieved the way everything in the ag kind of economy is starting to move. They think once it's going to take a little bit, but once everything going, it's going to kind of really click in place, which is good to hear, because we've kind of seen some, I guess, lower prices that just hurt to pay bills. So it's good to hear that.
Yeah, the Crop Advantage Series in Burlington, Iowa, which the three of us attended, we split up, and Chad Hart discussed it, and he reiterated the same thing, tariffs, and everybody's how is that all going to work? But I can mention when tariffs were put on the chemistry from China last time, it didn't affect prices because China absorbed them. They didn't get passed down. So some of the talk about some of these things being passed down to the ultimate consumer may or may not be correct. In other words, it's not always done one way. But Chad Hart said, kind of reiterated the same thing, that exports are what will lead us out of our prices. And corn right now, he was a little more optimistic on corn, but not very optimistic on soybeans at this point. But if you look at the export charts, corn is close to a record, but will it continue? And so that's started out slow, but we're up above the 5-year average, and so that was positive. So that's my little bit of cross-referencing that there was a little bit of optimism. But are we going back to 22 prices? No, we're not going back there.
I think the interesting part on the export, to segue this just a little bit further, is that on corn we should be really excited, because even if there is the possibility of tariffs, the people who are buying our corn right now are all within our free trade agreement. So tariffs really can't affect them. Where on the bean side, obviously if we go to a tariff match against China being a large consumer of our soybeans, potentially there could be some issues with soybeans. But from the corn standpoint, why he was, I guess, so not necessarily bullish, but excited about corn is that the people who are making moves in corn right now with the exports shouldn't be affected by a tariff deal, between Mexico, Colombia, Guatemala. Egypt is an exciting one as well, because that means we're priced extremely attractive. So, once again,
he said they were the Walmart buyer.
They are.
He said if you're getting Egypt's business, then you're priced right.
And then the last one on the export that I thought was really, really interesting that he made the comment on was that we are the best. We're the best producers. We're the low-cost producers.
And the volume.
Yep. But it's always something else in the background that tends to kind of mess us up as producers, that whether that be political or logistic. But the American farmer is doing what they do best. They're producing goods, and they're doing it at a very price competitive advantage compared to some other markets.
And when I talked to Chad right before he went on, I said, well, last time Trump was in, prices were terrible, and he compensated the farmer. And he said, well, there was a $30 billion sitting in some fund that he was able to tap to pay the farmers. That's not there this time. So where the money would come from, we don't know. So if we expect a repeat of what we saw in the last Trump administration, where money's going to flow towards the farmer to compensate him for low prices so we can build our markets and get the demand back, I'm not sure. He was able to tap into some fund. I don't know which fund it was, but it was one of the ag funds that had $30 billion in it just sitting there. So that's where the money came from to pay the farmers during that stretch. So he said, don't count on that this year, this time, or this next 4 years. So unless something changes. So that was a little bit disheartening to me from listening to that, because I thought, well, he has a history of he's going to figure out how to compensate farmers and make sure that they're made whole so they can, keep doing business. So we'll have to see on that.
Yeah, they mentioned that down there, roll-in, whatever, from Rabo Research of, ag business. I mean, he mentioned how the administration, we would have never thought we would have had a Trump and Musk duo. And he said, they're all pro-ag and, rural communities. Be interesting to see, but he believes that the administration is pro-farmers, and so we'll see some good response.
I would agree on that. I mean, he's at least talking that way. We'll see what he does.
Yeah, not to get political, but a lot of times when we come into a new administration, there's rhetoric that goes in that, if you take a step back and look back almost every inauguration, 100 days afterwards, most rhetoric probably really doesn't come true, or it lies somewhere in the less extreme on either not as bad as what we thought or didn't really even have any effect at all.
You're exactly right. When it comes to problems, most of the problems we have only exist in our brains. They don't exist in reality. So you have to deal with what's reality, and that's a good point. Very good point.
I just wanted to add something too quick before Ben talks. But we're talking
Why
about.
Is that going to take forever?
No. But when we get talking about as a country, or the low cost producer, and we have the quality, but the biggest issue that they really talked about was that the U.S. has Achilles heel of too much storage. So that's why sometimes the markets aren't kind of where we want them to be right away, because other countries go other places first because they're cheapest, because they have to move it. So sometimes storage can be a good thing, but then also we've got to kind of maybe play the longer game to get those other countries to come and buy.
Yeah, Chad brought that up about Russia and Ukraine. I mean, not necessarily a storage, but they have a very high motivation to convert commodities into cash.
Yeah, he said if we're $4, they're $3.95. In other words, they got to move it. They need cash. They'll sell it at any price just to generate cash. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen here. But that demand thing, Chad Hart said that generally when you get your demand going, the benefit comes 2 to 3 years later in prices. So we are right now creating a lot of demand, and if that continues, so that's what he said to watch. Watch the exports. That's going to be the key to us, maybe 2 years, 3 years now, having back to where prices are strong.
Yeah, and building on that demand side, one of the things in that conversation as well is talking about the soy crush capacity along with the renewable diesel and where that is at. There's a map here that we can throw up that shows the existing plants and the new soy crush facilities that are set up for this renewable diesel. There's 2 new ones in Iowa that are up and running, one in northeast Iowa and one in northwest Iowa. But what he was talking about with that demand is we've hit a flat line because there's only so many millions of gallons that are willing to be bought at a price that is higher than what typical typical petroleum style of reserves would allow, and that number is actually about 5 million gallon, and that's about what China needs for their, or not China, California, could be the same thing, for what their demand is.
Yeah, so they are the only demand right now for this renewable diesel.
Right, so they're talking about this SAF is a potential option. But what really got me, and it's a question that I've been asking myself, why hasn't this thing exploded? Well, it's because because they are making this renewable diesel is actually diesel, the cost structure is still slightly higher than what it is for typical refinery purposes.
Regular oil. Yeah.
And he came out and gave us a number. He goes, it's approximately, about $1 more expensive than where does that match your notes? It's about $1.
I thought it was 2 to 3, and then it was 5 plus on SAF.
Yep.
It was 5 plus on the SAF, but I thought,
which is the jet fuel.
Correct. So what we're getting at is that it's still a little bit more expensive to produce than typical petroleum products, and we may need a little bit of subsidy to get the ball rolling on this renewable diesel, because he brought up a great point in ethanol that basically when they first started ethanol, a bushel of corn would produce 2.5 gallon of ethanol, and by the time you get 10 years down the process, that bushel of corn would now create 3 gallon of ethanol, and that's all that's all that you need to make that product as competitive as the petroleum-based products alone. So
yeah, and I mean, petroleum has what, a 150-year head start on soybeans, so obviously they've got their cost structures to where they know where they're at, and it's very predictable. On the soybean crush side, where what really, I mean, infancy would probably be even an early term for that. So to your point, I think that we have the capabilities. Now it's going to be whether the farm groups and or politicians keep it going through either the programs similar to like the 45Z and that style of products, that we need a little bit of a subsidy there to keep that alive long enough to let those folks figure out how to maximize the profitability with that and refine their practices. No pun intended on that word, but
right.
We can do it. They obviously did it in ethanol, and I thought the interesting part on the SAF was Chad actually thought that they could do a better job with a sustainable model with corn for SAF than soybeans, but it didn't seem like there was much interest in doing that quite yet. But
Ben, just to clarify those numbers, the biodiesel was $1 higher, and biodiesel is where they're using animal fats and oils and whatnot, and blending, yeah. And renewable was $2 to $2.50 higher than regular diesel right now. So that's the issues that they're fighting against, and he recommended, if they subsidize it until we get the efficiencies worked out in these plants, that would be a good investment. Probably.
Yeah, and something that I'd like to look into, is that $1 to $1.50? Is that on a per barrel basis, or is that on a per gallon basis? Because if it's on a per barrel basis, it's really not that far of a stretch to get your efficiencies where you need it.
I assume it would be a gallon, but yeah, that's a poor assumption on my part. I think the other two would be in this, and I wish another one of those, asking more questions on the effect that this used cooking oil imports are having on some of these markets as well. How much has that tapered down some of the domestic crush? One of those you forget to ask the question in the moment, but allegedly some other players are using 1% used cooking oil and then using palm oil, which definitely is not quote unquote used cooking, and scoring higher on that sustainability model. So it'd be interesting to see from a political standpoint if there's anything done to slap hands on that, and I think that has some potential to maybe even up the marketplace a little bit.
And he was kind of not very positive on electric cars. They're 1.1% of the cars on the road, and he talked about the longevity, how long we keep our cars and whatnot, but he said even 10 years from now he didn't expect electric cars to be more than 2%. So it's not going to impact the demand for these fuels and these. And he actually thinks that the flex fuel vehicles are going to be the solution to managing all this.
So Dylan, you don't have to worry about how you're going to fit a toolbox in a Cybertruck.
Yeah.
And
maybe a Prius.
Strangely enough, as I was leaving the conference, I did see a Cybertruck drive by in Burlington, Iowa.
There is one in Burlington. Yep.
One of the other more agronomic things, and I think we'll probably hit on these just to keep things prudent for time. I'm going to hit on Allison Robertson. Dr. Allison Robertson is the corn pathology, plant pathology specialist at Iowa State, and she had some good data this year. She had some multiple location sites that had tar spot and southern rust. She went through the identification process on both of those products. We with tar spot, she doesn't really like the rub-off method for identification because it bruises the leaves and sometimes makes it hard to see when you're trying to rub the fly poop off. So with tar spot, you can actually have that pustule on the top side of the leaf and the bottom side of the leaf, and that's a really quick way for you to be able to tell whether it
goes all the way through the leaf. Yeah.
Yep.
So look on the bottom side of the leaf.
Yep. And that's one really good way. We've talked about the identification between southern rust and common rust before. The common rust is more of a bright red. Southern rust is more of a bright orange. The common rust, I believe, is more spread out, and the southern rust kind of comes more clumpy and blotchy.
And southern rust comes with the hurricanes. That's where it all came up. There was all that air moving north, and the hurricane that hit Texas, come through Texas, that area. I mean, it was so massive it blew up lots and lots of spores. So
correct. Yep. So, but her main takeaway, and Cody Schneider's as well from the Southeast Iowa Research Farm, is there's two main takeaways. R1 timeframe, if especially in Southeast Iowa, she said that she would have guys not even worry about spraying fungicides in like Northwest Iowa with the drier climate that they have been having. We have more rainfall here in Southeast Iowa. R1 timeframe is the most bulletproof. There is some evidence that there's a little bit better efficacy with the two-shot, at an R1 and a slightly later application, but it's not going to pay for itself from the yield data that she has seen. And the more expensive products, the newer products, are products that are more consistent in her data as well.
And last longer.
Yep, and that's probably why they are more consistent, is because they have the longer residuals. So they did quite a bit of Veltima at 7 ounces, Veltima at 10 ounces. Another product they like is the Moravis Neos of the world, the Delaro Completes, and every now and then they didn't get quite as consistent data on Approach Prima, but those are some of the products that she would recommend for combating tar spot and southern rust.
And she pretty much said, and if you're in Southeast Iowa, plan to spray.
Yes.
Plan to spray. I mean, one time, and that should do it. Dennis Todey, the director of the USDA Climate Research, talked a little bit about weather, and he's saying we're definitely having our freeze dates change in the spring. In other words, we're getting longer growing seasons. We're having our freezes are ending earlier and are coming later in the fall. And but basically, he kind of predicted that our weather was going to mirror last year. I mean, pretty much is what he thought. But and he did say rivers influence weather, and cities can influence weather, but not on a statewide basis, but in a local basis. We always say in Southeast Iowa we're surrounded by rivers, and how it changes the rainfall. Sometimes. So he did confirm that, but just in general, he expects that we're going to see a more normal type weather this summer, which will mirror pretty much what we had last year. That's what he said.
Yeah, the weather guy down there, he mentioned longer seasons, whatever. He's like, whenever they started calculating when the earth is going to warm up, it's only warmed up 1 to 2 degrees, right? Since they started, research on that, and they were projecting it to be 5 degrees warmer at this point in 2025. And so I guess it's a good news that we haven't warmed up to their projections. So, but like you mentioned, it's going to be the same. And we do have more snow on that side of the river than we do right here in West Point, Iowa.
The moisture was going to be east of the Mississippi. I mean, right now it's the way the fronts are coming through, and it seems like that we're getting the big snows along I-70 and then heading up the Ohio River, and that's going to stay that way for a little bit. So we're going to have the opportunity maybe to get in a little bit earlier than the Eastern Corn Belt. Anything else we want to contribute today?
Basically, there's if you Google Iowa State field notes, you can look at all of the different summaries of the presentations that happened at the Crop Advantage Series as well as the ICM conference. So if you Google Iowa State field notes, you'll find all of these articles that we're talking about here.
We might be able to put the QR code up too.
Yep.
So you can scan it or take the picture of it off the presentation today.
Yep. So we'll definitely have those added in here along with some of the other pictures we wanted to talk about. And we did some training with Meristem this week. There will be a video attached as well talking about their foliar product. Their whole foliar brand is Homestretch. And we wanted to talk about the differences between Harvest Shield Complete and some of their other nutritional programs that they have. So it's kind of like a comparison of the premium products versus the products that were built in before they had this Harvest Shield Complete product. So it's like the progression to getting to the Harvest Shield Complete. So quick 15-minute video there talking about nutritionals coming from the Meristem side that'll be attached as well.
Yeah, and next week is the Ag Land Expo in Des Moines, and we'll be reporting on that the next Cup of Joe episode. So that's another big meeting that kind of like I call think tanks, where people start projecting and thinking in all aspects of it. So that's another great meeting, and you can still sign up for that one virtually, and you can watch it from your computer at home. So that brings us to the corny joke, and it's actually a corny joke story, okay? If you remember last week, I told you the one about the Minnesota, cold weather thing. I said, 500, when it's 500 below zero, hell freezes over, but Minnesota school's only on a 2-hour delay. Well, this one here, we're going to go to Wisconsin, okay? The year is 2024, just, pretend our last election here. The United States just elected the first woman president, who happens to be from Wisconsin. A few days after the election, the president-elect, whose name was Susan, calls her father and says, "So, Dad, I assume you'll be coming to my inauguration." "I don't think so, Susie. It's an 18-hour drive." "Don't worry, Dad. I'll send Air Force One and a limousine to pick you up at your door." "I don't know, Susie. Everybody will be so fancy. What would your mother wear?" "Oh, Dad," replies Susan, "I'll make sure she has a wonderful gown, custom made by the best designer in Washington." "Honey," her dad complains, I can't eat those rich foods you guys eat. Do they serve tap beer?" The president-to-be responds, "Don't worry, Dad. The entire fare will be handled by the best caterer in Washington. I'll ensure your meal has potatoes and cheddar in it. You and your mom just have to be there." So her dad reluctantly agreed, and on January 20th, 2025, Susan is being sworn in as President of the United States. In the front row sits Susan's parents. Her dad, noticing a senator sitting next to him, leans over and whispers, "You see that woman over there with her hand on the Bible?" "You bet I do," whispers the senator in reply. The dad proudly beams, "Her brother played football for the Green Bay Packers." That tells you a little bit about Midwestern values, right?
Yep.
Anyhow, thanks for watching today. We appreciate your business. It's a good time to order your seed, take delivery of it. Sounds like we got an early window to plant from the weather forecaster, so make sure you're ready to go in March. And we hope your family is safe and healthy, and we'll see you next week.